Welcome to the final tutorial for Methods 1, Week 7. This tutorial is on generalization and maintenance. Let's talk first about generalization and clarify this term. Generalization is the ability of the student to use the skill taught beyond those conditions occurring within the instructional setting. In other words, it's the ability of the student to use this skill taught in real-world situations and contexts. It's the ultimate outcome of instruction. There are several types of generalization that can occur. Generalization can occur to other people, such as teachers, peers, paraprofessionals, therapists, family members, community members, etc. Generalization can also occur to other settings. If you're teaching a child to use the bathroom and wash his hands in the bathroom, there are bathrooms at home, there are bathrooms at school, there are bathrooms in the community, multiple bathrooms in the community that look different. All of those things might need to be considered. There's generalization to other materials. If a student is telling time, there's a clock in the classroom. There are digital clocks in multiple places, an alarm clock in the student's home, the microwave oven. There are watches that students might be required to wear. All of those materials are involved in telling time. And there's generalization, finally, to other stimuli. In the situation of a student learning greetings, the stimulus for responding and saying hello to another student or another person might be the person saying hello or hi in the student's name, or what's up, or how are you, or yo, or whatever. So there's lots of different stimuli that could come into play that would cause the student to respond hello back. There are several ways to program for generalization in instruction. The first way is to make sure that the outcome of the instruction is functional. And we've talked about what is the ultimate outcome in your instructional plan. How do we want the student to use the skill in the real world? We're going to teach to that. So this is a very important one. It should be considered at all levels of instruction and considered from the get-go. The same thing for number 2. You need to teach in the exact situations in which the student is to use the skill, when at all possible. If you want a student to learn how to shop in a grocery store, then take them to the grocery store. If you want a student to be able to tell time, then you need the student to be able to wear a watch, look at the watch, and tell time in that actual setting. So the first 2 need to be considered at all phases of instruction. Number 3 through 6 could be considered at multiple times. They could be considered when the student is actually acquiring the skill, or it could be that the student, it needs to acquire the skill in a more controlled setting, and then it needs to be programmed after the student acquires the skill. Number 3 is teaching using multiple people. Number 4 is teaching in multiple settings. Number 5 is teach with a variety of materials. And number 6 is vary the discriminative stimulus, which again, for an example of that, if we were doing color recognition, you'd want the student, you might start with some very controlled presentations of color cards, but obviously you'd move to different objects in the environment, multiple objects in the environment, so that the discriminative stimulus was varied. The next term we're going to talk about is maintenance, and generalization and maintenance sort of go hand in hand, but maintenance is the ability of the student to perform a skill over time, even after systematic instructional procedures have been withdrawn. We've talked in the last tutorial on reinforcement and in the tutorial in the class session on prompting about fading prompts, fading reinforcement, and fading is essential to ensure maintenance over time. So fading and maintenance really go hand in hand. There are 3 questions to consider when you think about maintenance. The first one is, how will instructional prompts and reinforcement be faded over time so that the student is responding to the natural prompts and reinforcers in the environment? The second question is, what procedures will be put in place to periodically assess whether the student's skills are being maintained over time? You need to think about how often will a student be assessed after instruction has been discontinued. How will the student be assessed, and how will data be collected? So the student has reached mastery, but that doesn't mean that you don't continue to watch and monitor over time, and procedures for doing that need to be determined. And the third question is, what procedures will be put in place to follow if skills are not being maintained over time? There are two questions to consider here. What are the criteria for reinstating instruction? How many times, over what period of time, what % accuracy would determine that the student has in fact lost some of the skills that have been taught, and indicate to you that you need to put some instructional procedures back into place. And the second thing to consider under question 3 is, what are the procedures for systematically now increasing prompts and reinforcement and then refeeding those components again? Typically this is done by looking at your instructional plan and moving to the phase of instruction that had the least intrusive prompting and the lowest rate of reinforcement, to go back to that level first and to teach and see if you can bring it up. Bring students' performance up. If you can, then you would then refade those prompts and that reinforcement over time. If that level didn't work, then you go to the next most intrusive level of instructional prompting and the next lowest rate of reinforcement, and so on. This ends the tutorial on generalization and maintenance. By now you have been through all 3 tutorials, and you are now invited to take the quiz that is provided to you online.